In the expanse of the old world, legends of brutal champions are known across the many lands that exist. Yet none are more infamous than the greenskin Warbosses who unite their clans through raw strength and unbridled savagery. Among these hulking leaders, two names rise above the rest of the greenskins for different reasons: GORBAD Ironclaw and GRIMGOR Ironhide. Though they lived in different eras, both left a trail of carnage that scarred the civilizations they fought against. But one question remains: who's the baddest and toughest orc between these two? In this episode, we'll delve into each Warboss's rise to power, recount their most brutal conquests, and compare their strengths in a hypothetical showdown. By the end, we'll have all the grim details needed to decide which greenskin legend reigns supreme. Plus, we are doing a giveaway in this one. You will have the chance to win a Steam key to the GORBAD Ironclaw DLC to add to your Total War Warhammer collection of playable factions. It's very easy to participate in the draw, so stay tuned until the end to learn how to win.
Hey guys, it's Joyer here. I just wanted to give you a quick massive thanks to all of you, since recently the channel reached 200,000 subscribers, and honestly that's a huge milestone that I never imagined we would reach, but hey, here we are and I'm grateful for it. In celebration of that, we did a giveaway in which more than 600 people participated, and I'm glad to announce that we already have a winner who was chosen randomly. The winner, Sebastian, has already been contacted, and the Great and Clean one has already been shipped all the way to Germany. So again, a huge thank you goes out to every single one of you who participated. Your support has really helped the channel grow up until this point, and I cannot wait to show you guys what else me and the team have in store for you this year. Now, with that out of the way, let's continue with the episode.
Within greenskin society, a warboss reigns supreme, often wielding the biggest chopper and unleashing the loudest war cry to command absolute authority. Vast hordes, known as Wars, rally under these hulking rulers, driven by a shared desire for conquest and mayhem, as is their primal nature. Respect is secured through brutal displays of might, while any sign of weakness invites an immediate challenge from a stronger, more vicious orc. This ceaseless cycle ensures that only the fiercest leaders retain their crowns, until an even meaner brute emerges from the chaos. Amid the echoes of war, one orc rose above the bloodshed to forge a legend that would haunt their enemies for a bloody long time. GORBAD Ironclaw. In his prime, GORBAD Ironclaw marshaled thousands of tribes under his banner. A colossal horde that nearly tore the entire empire asunder. Even the emperor at that time, Emperor Sigismund IV, fell in battle against this seemingly unstoppable war. Additionally, the once proud imperial province of Solent was ground into dust under the greenskin advance. In carving such a ruinous path, GORBAD cemented his reputation as one of the most terrifying warbosses to ever walk the old world. Yet GORBAD was more than a brutish conqueror. Rising from obscurity as an orc of immense size and strength, he united the Ironclaw tribe and established himself as a powerful warboss in the Badlands. From a place called the Iron Rock, the Greenskins' fortress base, the warboss launched attacks to the World's Edge Mountains and beyond, always looking for new battles and more blood to spill. The Broken Tooth tribe, led by warboss Crusher Zoggoth, had long been a thorn in the Ironclaw orc side, a persistent rival that vied for territory and spoils. Their challenge to GORBAD's rise was met with merciless retribution. Determined to crush any opposition, GORBAD devised the most brutal ends imaginable for enemy warbosses, displaying their grisly fates where all could witness. Crusher Zoggoth, the leader of the Broken Tooth tribe, was no exception to this treatment, and he met his end in a gruesome fashion, being turned to pulp by a stampede of cave squigs. This shocking strategy of ending his enemies in spectacular ways sent ripples of terror through the greenskin ranks, and the Broken Tooth orcs, once so proud of their might and independence, were left with little choice but to submit. Faced with GORBAD's unwavering brutality, other mobs and tribes in adjacent territories swiftly followed suit. Orcs and goblins across the region bowed before his banner, recognizing that might alone was not what set GORBAD apart. His cunning, leadership, and tactical prowess drove his followers to feats of merciless carnage. Tales abound of him flinging entire enemy units aside with his own ferocity, but it was his ability to inspire and organize the lads that truly spelled doom for any who stood in his path. GORBAD extended his power across the rugged mountain range from Mad Dog Pass to the scorched cliffs of Fire Mountain, forging a harsh stronghold that echoed with the clamor of his assembled armies. It was around this time that GORBAD began having more and more troubles with the dwarfs, who also populated the mountains. Although his conquests typically saw rival greenskin tribes absorbed into his ranks, the dwarfs refused to submit, turning each battle into a grueling and bloody conflict. Yet even their renowned resilience could not halt GORBAD's advance. When the dust settled, entire dwarf holds stood empty, their people slaughtered, their sacred relics and tombstones desecrated, and their riches sacked.
GORBAD Ironclaw has cast our halls into ruin, slaughtered our kin, and defiled every sacred stone. We shall mourn our fallen, aye, but we shall not yield. Mark my words, the day will come when we repay the greenskin filth tenfold, and on that day, the very mountains will echo with our vengeance.
For a warboss of GORBAD's caliber, subjugating other greenskin tribes and driving the beleaguered dwarfs from their mountain strongholds posed little difficulty, particularly since the dwarfs' main armies refused to meet his massive horde in open combat. Instead, in their legendary pride and stubbornness, the dwarfs sealed their gates and hunkered down, determined to outlast the orcish storm. Such was the menace that GORBAD and his apocalyptic horde had become. One can only imagine the fierce debate and restless nights that led them to choose such a desperate course of action. With the dwarfhold raids behind him, GORBAD Ironclaw set his sights on the sprawling lands of the Empire, envisioning a far more lucrative prize than the battered mountains. Reports of human cities brimming with trade and wealth reached him from roving greenskin scouts, and his ambitions shifted decisively toward conquering what he saw as prime plunder. GORBAD's gigantic horde made their way to the green fields of Avaland, and eventually they reached the Moot. Though often underestimated, the halflings mounted a spirited defense. Their fields and townships, however, proved absolutely no match for the raw numbers and crushing brutality of the Ironclaw horde. Word of the invasion in the Empire's territory spread swiftly, prompting the province of Avaland to dispatch a sizable force to halt the greenskin advance on their lands. Undeterred, GORBAD arranged a counterattack, meeting the humans head-on. Surrounded and outmatched, the Avalanders fought valiantly, but were ultimately overwhelmed, leaving GORBAD with yet another victory to add to his growing legend. In a matter of days, the Moot's peaceful pastures were ablaze, and GORBAD trampled every resistance that tried to stand before them. Invigorated by success, GORBAD pushed deeper into Avaland, setting his sights on its provincial capital, Averheim. The city's walls and militia, though formidable, were simply not enough to withstand the massive that battered its gates. Within a short span, Averheim was tragically reduced to rubble, its defences crumbling under the pounding of greenskin siege weapons and the unstoppable tide of orc warriors. Emboldened by these conquests, GORBAD marched on Nuln, one of the Empire's most vital cities, famed for its foundries and military production. Despite fierce resistance from the city's well-trained garrison, GORBAD's onslaught proved overwhelming to its defenders. Count Brutus Leitdorf of Avaland orchestrated a tactical withdrawal across Nuln's main bridge, gathering his forces in the western districts of the city, taking advantage that Nuln was naturally divided by the river. By demolishing the bridge in their wake, Leitdorf protected a significant portion of the city. This would have been very effective if the Imperial forces were facing just another greenskin warboss, but GORBAD was different. The vast majority of orc warbosses used their sheer strength and fighting skills to fight off their enemies, with the bulk of their armies behind them in an avalanche of carnage and brutality. Yet GORBAD was not only strong, but the warboss proved to be very resourceful, enlisting orc raiders to form an improvised fleet. While relentlessly assailing the defenders, he also supervised the construction of a makeshift floating bridge from the shattered hulls and smoking beams salvaged from the ruined eastern quarters of the city. This maneuver gave GORBAD's horde a foothold on the far bank, allowing them to surge across in overwhelming numbers. Soon after, Nuln lay in flames, and Leitdorf, along with the remaining survivors, was forced to abandon the city, fleeing towards Altdorf in haste. Nuln's fall dealt a severe blow to the Empire, leaving Emperor Sigismund with scant forces and forcing him to plead for aid from the northern provinces. Taking advantage of the weakened state, GORBAD led his war through Solent and Wissenland, going as far as slaughtering the Elector Count Eldred of Solent in battle and seizing his rune fang as well as the province's crown. Eldred's remains were then fed to Nala, his hungry boar. Then the orc proceeded to obliterate every vestige of the province. Some say that no province before had suffered this level of destruction, as it was practically burned and trampled.
I can still picture the green tide rolling over the fields where my grandfather once harvested wheat. We heard the thunder of war drums growing nearer every night until there was no choice but to run. I left behind the family home my father built, a workshop full of half-finished crafts, everything that defined my life. We loaded what little we could onto a single cart and fled under the moonlight. Even now, I hear those drums echoing in my nightmares. And I thank the gods we escaped with our lives, though we lost all else to GORBAD's horde.
Turning next toward Altdorf, the Emperor rallied knights from various orders under Count Adolphus for a desperate counterattack at the Battle of Grunberg. Although the knights initially outmaneuvered GORBAD's wolf riders, the orc warboss responded with a powerful charge of boar boys and spider riders. In the ensuing melee, Adolphus managed to strike Gorbad with his rune fang, but was grievously maimed when the enraged warboss tore out the blade, severing the Count's arm in the process. With Adolphus wounded and their momentum shattered, the remaining knights fled for the refuge of Altdorf's walls. Irritated by his wound that seemed not to heal, Gorbad Ironclaw pushed his massive horde into an ill-advised assault on Altdorf. Driven by impatience, Gorbad unleashed charge after charge across the boggy terrain south of Altdorf, forcing entire tribes to navigate treacherous marshes. Many greenskins disappeared into the mire or were crushed beneath the surge of their own ranks, leaving scores of casualties in their wake as time passed. The reckless charges through marshy terrain drained the greenskin ranks, and even when Gorbad shifted tactics to lay a proper siege, the damage to his war was evident. Grumblings arose in the camps, and disillusioned mobs broke away to raid the wider and attractive lands of Reichland on their own, leaving Gorbad to contemplate his dwindling options. In a final effort to shatter Altdorf, Gorbad unleashed a half-dozen flying wyverns. These beasts wreaked havoc, tearing apart defenders and even crashing into the Emperor's palace. Emperor Sigismund himself fell victim to one such monster, its rampage culminating in a macabre scene within the throne room where the Emperor lost his life. Although the wyverns inflicted significant casualties, they failed to fulfill Gorbad's main objective of breaching the city gates, and they were eventually put to the sword. With his forces thinned, his wounds unhealed, and his strongest assets either slain or stuck in fierce fights, Gorbad was forced to abandon the siege, leaving a scarred Altdorf and a fractured war in his wake. It was the first time the massive war had been put to a halt. In the aftermath of the failed siege, most of Gorbad's allied tribes had splintered off. Many back to where they came, while many others seeking battle and loot in those lands where the spoils were rich. They would soon be eliminated by the vengeful imperial forces as soon as their cohesion and momentum was lost, or even by greenskin tribes fighting amongst themselves. As for Gorbad's forces, only the Ironclaw and Broken Tooth Orcs, along with a few goblin tribes, stayed by his side as he led them along the River Reich. Much of their plunder was abandoned in their haste to escape. Their final stand took place at the foot of a crimson peak south of Blackfire Pass, where the High King of Karazakarak rallied a dwarf host, seeking retribution for the past offences made against their people. Though Gorbad carved a bloody path through the dwarf ranks, his followers fell apart around him as the battle progressed. By dusk, he stood surrounded. His ultimate fate is still unclear, but it was most likely that the dwarves ended his life then and there. To this day, Gorbad's name lingers on in legend. He was an orc like no other, possessing not just raw strength, but a keen resourcefulness and cunning rarely seen among greenskins. Where Gorbad's cunning and resourcefulness left the Empire and Dwarf realms battered, GRIMGOR IRONHIDE would later stride forth to prove that sheer brutality and an insatiable thirst for battle could topple entire kingdoms as well. Many scholars and academics still debate whose iron will left a deeper scar on the realm. GRIMGOR first distinguished himself in a brutal rebellion against the Chaos Dwarfs. They made the mistake of experimenting and creating a stronger breed of orcs to later use them as killing machines in their own battles and for their own twisted purposes. But this turned out to be a bad idea. The Black Orcs made a revolt that nearly extinguished their captors and established the Black Orcs' reputation for their relentless ferocity. At the head of them was GRIMGOR Ironhide, a Black Orc of hulking size that had an appetite for battle that no other orc could match. Having broken free, GRIMGOR rose as a dominating presence, forging alliances with a sheer brutality and iron will that left countless rivals slain in his wake. Before long, his banners shaded the horizon as thousands of tribes, from goblins to orcs of every stripe, rallied beneath him. The hunger for war then drew him northward to Kislev, where his hordes met the stubborn men of the icy plains. Despite the biting cold of the lands and the fierce defenders that protected their homes, GRIMGOR led his greenskins to one savage victory after another, ravaging the lands of the north, with each conquest only fueling his unquenchable desire for more bloodshed. His forces swiftly overwhelmed 3 armies sent by the Kislevites, each led by boyars and composed of knights and horse archers. These armies were systematically crushed, leading to widespread looting and the destruction of towns. GRIMGOR's advance was marked by brutality. He consumed the fallen for sustenance as his horde pressed forward. As GRIMGOR approached the city of Kislev itself, the situation changed dramatically. The Ice Queen, Katarine, invoked powerful magic to summon a blizzard that ravaged GRIMGOR's forces. This unnatural storm caused thousands of goblins to freeze and left the orcs unable to forage for food. The orc shamans eventually convinced GRIMGOR that they could not fight against such magic with their own. Resigned but furious, GRIMGOR turned his horde back towards the mountains, only to find that every time he attempted to return to Kislev, the storm would re-emerge with renewed ferocity. No man or warrior had stopped GRIMGOR but the power of nature. Following his defeat in Kislev, GRIMGOR established a new base in Karak Ungor, where the goblins of the Red Eye tribe fought continuously against the Skaven. Here, GRIMGOR and his Black Orcs engaged in ongoing battles with the Ratmen that plagued the innumerable tunnels below, finding a new outlet for his insatiable desire for conflict. The Skaven's ability to replace their numbers and attack through hidden tunnels meant that GRIMGOR faced a seemingly infinite tide of enemies. Each time he believed he had cleared an area, more Skaven would emerge from secret passages to continue the fight, and each time their enemies would grow larger and more numerous. Eventually, GRIMGOR was facing off against rat ogres. Despite sustaining losses, GRIMGOR remained undeterred and continued to seek out further challenges within the tunnels, driving the Skaven deeper and deeper into the mountains. Eventually, GRIMGOR got bored of the challenges that the Skaven presented and turned back to the upper levels of Karak Ungor to seek out new and fresh challenges. GRIMGOR Ironhide was only put down in combat by none other than Archaon the Ever-Chosen during the End Times, in a climactic battle of Mittenheim, and even then, the Lord of the End Times had to unleash the demonic powers of his sword to accomplish the feat. We have covered more of GRIMGOR's story in another video that goes deeper into the Black Orc's rampages through the world. You can check it out by following the link in the video description. But what would happen if GRIMGOR Ironhide were to face off against GORBAD Ironclaw? The clash between the massive Warbosses would be a monumental battle, characterized by their distinct strengths and combat styles. GORBAD has a mighty boar pet named Narl, a fast and muscled boar that is covered in scars, showing the many battles he has taken part in. He is as one with GORBAD, and the boar knows when to turn, when to attack, or when to let his master do the work. The synergy between them is one that is forged only through the many hard-won and bloody battles that they have shared. All things considered, in a face-to-face battle, one-on-one, GRIMGOR would potentially win, as he might overpower GORBAD through sheer brute force. There wasn't any recorded instance of GRIMGOR being overwhelmed by any foe, not even trolls, mutants, ogres, or by sheer numbers. He always came out on top as an unstoppable green monster of muscle and raw power. It was only during the end times, at the world's end, when he finally met his match. In an army versus army setting, perhaps GORBAD could take the win. He has shown many times that he is a capable tactician, able to pull strategies and tactics to outmaneuver his opponents. GORBAD's knack for grand strategy and his boar-mounted mobility could tilt the scales in his favour. He has demonstrated time and again an uncanny ability to outmaneuver foes, whether through cunning ambushes or improvised constructions. His war also tends to be well equipped with war machines, ensuring ranged support that complements his tactical acumen. Yet, GRIMGOR's presence on the battlefield must not be underestimated. His fearsome reputation as a Black Orc warboss drives nearby units to near frenzy levels of aggression, often allowing him to punch through the enemy lines by sheer force. While GRIMGOR lacks GORBAD's boar-mounted speed, he compensates with savage determination and raw physical might. His Black Orcs follow his lead with unbreakable loyalty. When GRIMGOR goes on the warpath, morale surges to terrifying heights. GORBAD rides a massive boar, which grants him greater mobility compared to GRIMGOR's foot-slogging approach. This allows GORBAD to maneuver around the battlefield more effectively, potentially outflanking GRIMGOR or striking vulnerable targets. Ultimately, if the battle stays fluid and favours hit-and-run maneuvers or enveloping tactics, GORBAD's mobility and command might carry the day. However, if GRIMGOR and his elite troops pin down GORBAD's forces in a close-quarters melee, the Black Orc Warboss's brutal leadership could overwhelm even the most cunning strategy. And thus, the stage is set for an epic showdown between two of the greatest warbosses in greenskin history. GORBAD Ironclaw and GRIMGOR Ironhide each bring their own brutal brand of leadership and savagery to the battlefield. But who would truly prevail if they ever crossed choppers in a one-on-one brawl, or if they led their wars against one another in a colossal clash? Share your thoughts, cast your vote, and tell us which warboss stands supreme in your eyes. Plus, one lucky comment will be chosen at random to receive a Steam key for the GORBAD DLC expansion for Total War Warhammer 3, putting the legendary warboss directly under your command in the digital realm. We thank you for watching, and may the best greenskin win!